Hello, hello, my fellow geeks. Welcome to episode number 44 of the Indian App Geek. My name is Vishal Mehra. Joining us today on the podcast is Jean-Pierre Clercin, the man who's been connecting communities across Asia Pacific with ATR's iconic turboprop aircraft. With a master's degree in space technology and a career spanning flight simulators, aircraft sales, and aerospace innovation, JP is the ultimate aviation Swiss Army knife. From founding aviation tooling companies in Canada to spearheading ATR's commercial sales in the bustling skies of Asia, this man knows more about short runways and long term strategy than most airline CEOs know about their own in flight menus. Welcome to the Indian App Geek, JP.
Hello, Vishal. Thank you for having us.
Let's start from the very beginning. How did you fall in love with aviation, JP?
That's a long story. No, I mean, very simple, really. I mean, I'm not 100% French. I'm half French, half Peruvian, and I grew up in Africa. And so every summer, almost every summer, I was taking the plane to go back to France or go to visit my family in Peru, my mother's family in Peru. And so from when I was a very little kid, I mean, traveling by plane was the way to connect with family and with loved ones, and kind of flying with those beautiful big iron birds and connecting with family was something that I mean, really kind of resonated in me. And so from when I was a very little kid, I mean, I wanted to be in aviation. I mean, smell the kerosene in the morning, and yeah, I mean, that's how I was interested in everything that flies.
And how did the opportunity at ATR came along? Did turboprops always interest you?
Turboprop, I mean, for a very interesting, I would say, coincidence. I mean, having part of my journey as a traveler. I mean, in Peru, I mean, at the time you had a lot of the turboprops flying, to go to connect some of the more remote areas. When I was in Madagascar as well, I mean, they had ATR. I mean, 72-500s. I remember they were making a big thing out of it. And so there was already, I mean, a big connection. But I mean, the path that brought me to ATR was a bit more unusual. Is that, I mean, when I started my career, I worked with a gentleman called Thierry Casamian, and I moved to Singapore. I mean, that the first time around, and he was working very closely with ATR at the time to support the operators in Asia Pacific, and that opened the door. And then for some reason, then I moved to a company doing flight simulators, and they were themselves as well working a lot with ATR. And so, I mean, all that, I mean, led me, I mean, to eventually work for ATR. So all the roads, I mean, lead to Rome, so somehow.
It's been a couple of weeks since the Paris Air Show now. You were able to secure multiple orders across airlines like Uniair and JSX, as well as some undisclosed customers. There was an unveiling of your updated market forecast as well, about 2,600 aircraft over the next 2 decades, if I'm reading it right. India alone is expected to need about 200 plus ATRs. What's your assessment of the market, JP?
I'm very bullish, I mean, on the ATR, because I think it's a great tool to connect smaller areas, smaller communities, and it has strong uh, environmental credentials as well. And I think that's what we need. I mean, if we want, I mean, to foster more connection, if you want people to connect with each other, I mean, go visit each other. I mean, we need, I mean, this kind of inclusive means of transport. I think the ATR is an interesting proposition. It does cater to a few different markets. I mean, you have the markets which are more PSO, public service, essential services, if you want. And there are a small portion of our activities where there is no other way to go to these places than the aircraft. And you have a few in India. I mean, you look at northern India, I mean, it's quite complex to get otherwise. But if you look at some of the areas as well in Indonesia or in the Pacific, I mean, you would have the same kind of logics, or Brazil in some remote area of the Amazonia. Then you would have the connecting aspect where, I mean, you want to connect your hub with shorter routes, with shorter distance airports. And you have a few people like that, I mean, I would say you can talk about Cebu, for instance. You can talk about Air New Zealand. You can talk about IndiGo, to name a few, that do use the ATR to connect their hubs, with shorter distance. And then you have a very strong emerging, or not emerging, but a strong growing market, which is the point-to-point. And I think that's where, I mean, we see the most promising perspectives, and in India in particular, but as well in the US, it is what we call the regional mobility, is the ability to connect point-to-point, in secondary cities. And we see in the US and the India have different underlying logics. I mean, if you want, in India, it's very much about, I mean, when you call ground infrastructure not being where they should be, or not growing fast enough versus what the population is expecting, or what can be done, in a certain amount of time, and that, I mean, underpins the requirements of regional aviation, because then what I say usually is that when you have a runway, you don't need a highway. And so with two runways, I mean, you can connect two small cities, and you don't need to build a big highway in between. In the US, it's probably a bit different. Over time, smaller cities have lost connectivity by air, and an aircraft like the ATR can restore that link. And so we see that very big need, I mean, overall emerging. And I think the ATR, because of its cost of operation, can deliver quite an attractive proposition and offer an inclusive way of traveling by air. I think what's fascinating in India, which goes beyond probably what we see in other markets, is that 90% of the trips, so every trip that you have in India, I mean, if you take all of them, 90% of them are made under 550 kilometers. So only 10% are above 550 kilometers. And that's where, I mean, most of the aviation today is concentrated. I mean, it's longer routes. But if you look at what the ATR does very well, it's connect shorter routes, so below 550 kilometers. And so the reservoir, if you want, of activity in India is immense because of those 90%. And the market share in that segment for aviation is only 3%. So we have a huge runway, I mean, with no pun intended, I mean, there to grow. And we are very enthusiastic. There's a lot of enthusiasm on our side when you look at, the way that the government is supporting that segment, the way that there is a lot of people looking at it, very keenly. And that's where I think, to be fair, I mean, 200 aircraft, I mean, sounds conservative in my view, because I think the market is probably 2, 3, maybe 4 times bigger. I mean, of course, that's potential, right? So that's where, I mean, we also need to be conservative in the way where we communicate on this. So.
I just want to latch on to one of the points you mentioned about the American market. As of recent years, regional jets dominate the US regional aviation market, accounting for about 90% of capacity. Turboprops used to be the backbone of short-haul flying, now make up, I think, less than 10% of the fleet and operations. Most regional jets from your friends at Embraer, do you see ATR getting into the RJ space?
No, so it's an interesting comment you did. I don't think the short hops are not made by jets. I mean, today the short hops are made by car in the US. That's where, I mean, there's been a big drive in terms of loss of connectivity in that country. Because the true competitor of an ATR or turboprop at large is the ground transport, because it's about the time it takes for you to go from point A to point B and the affordability of that mobility. So some people, when you have in the US 200, 300, 400 kilometers, people will just take their car. If you compare a regional jet and an ATR, I mean, anything below 400 nautical miles, 500 nautical miles, call it maybe 400 nautical miles, let's keep it at that. I mean, hands down, the turboprop will do a better job because of the operating costs. And that has to do with there's no black magic in that. There is no great, advantage of the ATR or great science. It's just technology of the jet versus the technology of the turboprop. Uh, every flight, every cycle, I mean, costs a lot of money on the jet, right? Because you have to, I mean, go up and then you cycle and then you go down. Where the turboprop, it's a question of time in terms of the flight time. And so the shorter your flights when it comes to a jet, the more expensive it gets per kilometers. And that's where at one point, I mean, the turboprop becomes much better. And that's why we see 400 nautical miles usually, I mean, that kind of crossover point. That's where, I mean, for me, I mean, the competition is really about, I mean, the ground transport. And I don't think it's a competition because they have 97% of the market share usually. So it's just, for me, a reservoir, an opportunity, I mean, to get some more market into the ATR. It's a blue ocean, essentially.
Right. I was speaking with the CEO of Fly 91 a
My
few
friend
months back on
Manoj,
the show.
great guy,
Yeah,
great guy.
great guy. He was telling me about his experience with the ATRs from his Kingfisher days. About a month back, I was speaking with Abhijit Dasgupta, the head of network at IndiGo. He again, very appreciative of ATR. I did ask him, by the way, about the ATR versus Embraer, duel. Embraer, of course, is trying to make some moves in the Indian market, and we'll see what eventually happens. There have been rumors about Indigo placing orders for some more ATR aircraft. There were rumors before the Paris Air Show. Of course, things have drastically changed due to various reasons since then. The number floating around that time was 30 to 50 aircraft, I think. Do you see that coming soon?
I think, I mean, I'm the same way I'm not going to comment about, other OEMs. I'm not going to comment about customers. I think you should ask them where they are at. I think in the markets, you look at all the existing actors. I think they are potential targets for us. And when you look at the size of the markets, I mean, they are clearly targets for us and people we talk to. I mean, so today we are engaged with a number of active discussions with existing operators, with aspiring operators, and newcomers as well. So, but I won't delve into specifics. You'll understand that.
Sure, no problem.
Over a beer one day, I mean, we can do that.
Well, I look forward to that beer. For now, I will go back to your market forecast. India is expected to surpass Indonesia to become ATR's largest global market before 2030. If and when that happens, how do you plan to serve the market, and what are your investment plans for the country?
So, I mean, we've been present in India for now over 25 years, close to 30 years. I think the first operator was Jet Airways. And then we had Air Deccan, Kingfisher, the Alliance.
Alliance,
There's
yeah. Yeah.
a fair history, or as I call it, a destiny already together between ATR and India. And so over the years and with the fleet over there, there's been a strong ecosystem growing, pilots, engineers, technicians, flight simulators, and MRO. And we've been blessed with truly, I mean, great partners in the country that have grown alongside with us over the years. And so today, I'd say, and we even have an office, as a matter of fact, in the country. And that has been there, I think, for the last 20 years, maybe. And so we've been really, I mean, investing already and very much present in the markets as well, along with the ecosystem for years. Now, looking at the ambition that we have, 70 aircraft today, hopefully 200 more. I mean, if you ask me over the next 5, 10 years, I mean, this ecosystem will have to grow. And we're here to support it. Not necessarily with direct investments, but making sure that the different actors can develop themselves. And yeah, we need. I mean, we want to go beyond that. I think, if I look at the quality of the people, I mean, the quality of the technical background, engineers, the quality of the universities, I mean, suppliers. I mean, there's much more things that we can do, and of course, we are exploring a few of these areas. I mentioned, I mean, more universities. I mean, I mentioned suppliers. I mean, those are things that we from considering the situation overall. I mean, maybe there are things that we need to delve further.
Aviation has been outlined by the government as a focus area and something critical for the overall economy's growth. Accordingly, there have been different schemes facilitated by the government to push it. We were just talking about your market forecast. Do you see a possibility of a final assembly line in the country to address that demand?
I think, I mean, I wouldn't be so specific because I don't know. I mean, I mean, a FAL is a complex undertaking. A complex, why? Because I mean, a FAL is just a building where you put together an aircraft. But beyond that, you have supply chains. I mean, you need to build all the parts that come together with an aircraft. You need to build some of the system. You need to bring some of the system in, and all that, I mean, works only if you have a certain amount of aircraft that come together. So, I mean, today, I mean, I would say will be before being able to have any discussion on that. That will be, I mean, discussion we will have to assess. Today, we are wrapping our mind a bit more about the existing ecosystem to understand, I mean, who are the actors, what can be done, but nothing specific.
All right. We were just talking about RJs. I want to understand from you how ATR's turboprops uniquely address the needs of these thin routes compared to jets or other regional aircraft. Where is that advantage that ATRs bring in?
I think there are probably there are a few areas. I mean, the first thing is what I told you. I mean, and I commented about the technology, turboprop versus jets. They have very different features. A turboprop excels in shorter routes. Okay, the turboprop probably won't excel on longer routes. So you ask a turboprop to do 2,000 kilometers routes. I mean, it take a jet, right? I think they will do a much better job at that. But if your network serves routes that are 500, 550 or below, I mean, I would say that's where, I mean, I would say the limit is. I think a turboprop will outperform any other platform on the market. And that's where I think in India, but it's true as well in the US, in Europe, in many different parts of the world, is that if you want to irrigate a country with connectivity, with routes, with going to do small places, do small villages, do small communities, then it's very much like the vascular system. You don't need big veins, I mean, to go, I mean, close by, right? You need small little vessels that bring this thing. And that's where, I mean, the ATR gas, it irrigates really, I mean, from a very capillary level, the countrysides and the different areas of the country with an effective and dependable connectivity. And because of its cost of operation and its cost per trip, it makes it affordable. And I think that's what you want. I mean, if you want to develop connectivity, it's an affordable, accessible, and convenient connectivity.
We all know about IndiGo, we know about Alliance Air, and we know about Fly 91. Are you seeing interest from new startup airlines in the country, JP?
We
Startup
do, we do, we do. I mean, it's so. I mean, of course, you have the big players, and we talk to them, uh, and they've been very busy buying aircraft, as you've seen, long haul. I mean, single aisle. We've been talking to existing smaller operators, but of course, we've been working to all the new players that want to come into the field, and it's been a very exciting space in that segment. I think newcomers backed by some some of them by big corporation see the interest in getting in that space because they see that it's I wouldn't say it's a greenfield because there's already a lot of capacity and a lot of action, but see, I mean, the same thing that we do, which is a huge potential. So I mean, coming in now is the right moment because you can still build up a fairly good story besides the big players. And I think that's where we've been. I can count five, 4 or 5. I mean, startups that we've been talking to actually, and on those, I would say 2 are fairly advanced in terms of discussions.
That is brilliant to know. Best wishes to you and your team as you guys go forward in that process. Walk us through how a typical aircraft order happens, the average time taken for an aircraft to be built, and what the delivery process is like, JP.
So on the campaign, I mean, it varies a lot. Okay, so I've had campaigns that lasted 3 months for the shortest one, and the longest campaign I've been probably started 4 or 5 years. Okay, so that gives you a pretty wide range. Um, I think the moment where I would say that once the requirements for regional operation is set up, I mean that's where I mean people start to set up some scenarios about the network. I mean what they want to do and what is the vision that they have for the company. I mean that's where we will start to engage about simulating operating costs, network performance, and from there, I mean, they will do their own financial modeling, and that's where I mean they will have a sense of what to do and how they can structure the acquisition. And from there, I mean, yeah, you would start to kind of get into contractual discussions. But that's the beginning of the story, really, because once you've done that, then you need to find a way to fund the aircraft, which is another interesting part of the business. And of course, build them, which at the end, there is a very wise man that worked at Airbus, Mr. John Leahy. He said that nothing starts until somebody sells something. And so the production then sells, start to at the time. So that's where, I mean, this job is kind of a bit at the cornerstone, if you wish, of the organization and our story. And when it comes to production, I mean, well, there is, I mean, you need time to configure the aircraft, and so usually, I mean, you ask, I mean, a year and a half, I mean, to get the configuration ready. I mean, so, but then what happens, and will be interesting if one day you come to France. I mean, we'll be happy to show you the assembly line so that you have a look, I mean, what we do there. But we bring together the wings, the fuselage, the engines, the landing gears, and then we put all that together. We fit the cabin, we paint, and we make sure that all of that is working properly all together. And yeah, that's what happens. And then you have it once it's ready. I mean, it goes to what we call the flight line, where I mean the customer comes and check the aircraft, flies it to make sure that it's what he wants and to his expectations. Obviously, there's a lot of regulatory, I mean, requirements, but I mean, they also have the entitled to check it themselves to make sure it's working properly, as I said, and then to sign a piece of paper that says it's theirs. Of course, after they paid, but that's usually how it goes. But if you have a chance one day, I mean, again, let us know. I mean, if you come to Europe, I mean, we'll be very happy to show you. It's not something that we see every day, right? So I mean, I have to say, when I joined ATR a few years back, I mean, that was so exciting to see all those aircraft there. I mean, people coming to take delivery. So it was it's a place buzzing. It's quite nice.
Oh, I'd absolutely love to. In fact, I've been lucky enough to visit Toulouse and Hamburg for Airbus and to Boeing Seattle factory. So yeah, I'd love to plan my next visit around the ATR factory visit.
Vishal, please. So when you do, let me know. Okay, I'll be your
Absolutely.
guide.
Absolutely, JP. Thank you very much for the offer. So, usually, whenever airlines order an aircraft, whether it's a narrow body or a wide body, there is always competition, right? You have A versus B in all those duels. But it's so interesting. that the entire turboprop market is up to you now, right? Up to ATR. The Q400 is nowhere to be seen. Well, let me correct myself. The Q400 is not manufactured anymore. It's seen in quite a few markets. But I wanted to ask you, is selling a turboprop aircraft in, no, almost monopoly, if I may say that, is that easier or more difficult?
I think it's more difficult.
Yeah.
So and I wouldn't say monopolistic because people always have the choice. I mean, and I think people have the choice of buying an ATR or not doing anything because the fact is, as I said, the market is being catered for by surface transport. So
I love how you said people have a choice of buying an ATR aircraft or doing nothing.
or you're not doing anything in the sense, yeah, like they can decide not to buy, right? I mean, not to buy into regional aviation. And when I talk about regional aviation, that's why I mean I'm talking again about those shorter routes. And so it becomes a difficult discussion about, I mean, how do you value an aircraft in this case? Because the easy way is to say, okay, you take the price and the cost, and then you add a margin, but market doesn't work like that. So, I don't know if you're familiar with that. We have what we call the residual values. It's a way to assess the value of the aircraft after 5 years or 10 years, and gives a view also from the financiers on how to structure their own funding. And that gives a sense usually of what the market is. And so, but one of my first bosses, I mean, he said something very interesting. He says, I mean, the price of something, of an investment, is a function of how much money you can make with it. And I think that's, I mean, where what they call the British, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So, and so that's where, I mean, that's where, I mean, it becomes difficult discussion because, I mean, we always want more, and customers always want less, in terms of pricing. But I have to say, because of the positioning we have, because of the potential on the market, these last 12 months, those discussions have been a bit easier. Because I think we've been doing a lot of efforts, as well on the markets, a lot of effort as well on the operating cost, and that's kind of bearing fruits. So
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about the intent ATR has shown. While many global OEMs face long delivery delays, ATR has indicated shorter lead times for Indian customers. That definitely needs to be appreciated. How is ATR managing its supply chain to ensure timely deliveries?
So traditionally, and that has been a feature of the ATR markets, our customers don't plan a lot ahead. So that's been both a blessing and a curse. We for a long time we had people trying to buy aircraft for the next 12 months, which has been a bit difficult to do. But that means as well that, we're not exposed maybe to the same kind of difficulty in terms of assessing production. And I think the requirement being so buoyant, we've been very proactively trying to see and assess how we can manage the ramp up. I think the key question here, because of the strong demand, is how do we manage the ramp up? And how do we manage that visibility as well to support customers in the shorter run? And so, I mean, that's to be fair, I mean, the question that a lot of people much smarter than me are looking at today in the organization, production, procurements, our leadership team, to see how we raise to higher levels. Last year, I think we were at 35 aircraft or 36. And you've seen we've stabilized that over the last couple of years, and probably this year as well, because we want to be ready. I mean, with more robust, with more robust supply chain to be able to lift up that production, and we see that, I mean, it's gathering and gaining momentum. So that's where I think in the next 26, 27, I mean, we'll be able to be more. How can I say, and have more ambition for that ramp up. So we aim at getting back at 60, 70 aircraft, I mean, fairly soon on this.
Do you consult with IndiGo on their aircraft deployment plans, whether it's new routes or increasing frequencies on existing routes?
So as ATR, we do a lot of this at large, not only with IndiGo, I would say. I mean, with most of our customers, or at least the one that request it, or the largest one, because we see their success as the fabric of ours, and so we really, want to share as much knowledge as we can with them. And because of what I talked about earlier about the what we call the regional mobility, we've been investing a lot of time and a lot of energy to understand a bit how, what are the modes of transport, what people are aspiring to in terms of connection, where are the people traveling, and where, there is a sense to deploy capacity. And IndiGo is part of those people we have a discussion with. And so we have modeling, and we share with them in all transparency in what we see on the market. And it's for them then to choose, but at least they have our perspective on the markets. And it's a very fulfilling exchange because they bring as well a lot of value in terms of revenue, in terms of validating or invalidating some of the assumptions we have. And it's a very much a collaborative effort. Of course, we don't tell them what to do. Of course, they don't do everything we suggest. But from that exchange, from that friction, there is traction happening and movements, and I think it's making us both grow. To be fair,
The knowledge that you share with Indigo or with Fly91 or with any other airline, are those global best practices? And do you run regional or local models and share that knowledge with them?
we have models specific for India, pertaining to the fact that it's the biggest market for us or potential. So we have invested a fair amount of money and resources into understanding better the modes of mobility in the country. I think that's why as well, I think the discussion with the MOCA is quite interesting. We for instance starting to understand a bit better the impact of the new upcoming airports. The government is talking about additional 80 airports coming up, being reactivated, or new airports, that gives us, I would say, some credential to talk about this specifically in India. Of course, we talk about best practices, but if you talk best practices for revenue management, I don't think we have a lot of things to bring. But if you talk about network, that knowledge about mobility, because of this investment we've done, I think we have some stuff to say. But those best practices, for instance, when it comes to IndiGo, but more generally with all our customers, can be about maintenance, about reduction of operating costs. Those are the kind of things that you will typically share on a wider level. And if you talk about demand perspective, network perspective, it's very today specific to India.
And have there been any best practices that you have picked up from Indian carriers and shared or implemented with your other airline partners across the world?
With IndiGo, as a matter of fact, they, in many respects, they are a benchmark in my mind. So I look after Asia Pacific, so we have about 60, 70 operators. And in many aspects, IndiGo is a benchmark in terms of utilization, in terms of anticipation, in terms of planning. And I have to give it to the team. They have a very sharp and an excellent group of people running the operations. And so we tend to leverage on that expertise that they have, that some of the things that they do, to try to share with other operators that might not have the same scale or the same access to the same expertise, and that's very useful. And I think as a family or as a community of ATR operators, all those people are growing thanks to people like IndiGo.
As per your models and research, what's the sweet spot in terms of duration and distance for an ATR aircraft to really shine through, JP?
That's what I mentioned. Earlier, I think everything below 400 nautical miles, like 550 kilometers, would be where the ATR, is unbeatable. And the reason, again, it's, as I said, not about black magic or whatsoever. It's the fabric of the technology of the turboprop versus what the jet is. And so that's where we are I think really shining. And that's if you look at on average, our operators, I mean, use the aircraft in that segment. I think from what I recall, the IndiGo uses the ATR on average at 310 or 320 nautical miles. I think if you look at Air New Zealand, it's 250 or 260 nautical miles. Some people like in Tahiti, they will be probably closer to 400 nautical miles. So you see that range in between, I don't know, 250 to 400. That will be, and it's below because I mean I'm pretty sure below 100 nautical miles will be better as well. But at one point, I mean, when it's too short, then the car really outshines the ATR, right? So, but if you look at a collective transport, be it in a way, I mean, in areas where you don't have a lot of ground infrastructure, but more generally, I mean, where you have the need of connectivity, I mean, that offers a lot of possibility because then you start to put people together in the same place, right? So, I mean, you save a lot on fuel, you save a lot of capital cost and by using that kind of aircraft.
Let me make you do a flashback, okay? I want to know what your pitch was to Indigo when you guys won the first order from them. Can you help share some of that with us?
I think the discussion it went so we were talking with them for a while, okay, and trying to convince them of the merit of having a turboprop fleet. And I think at the time, Indigo, I mean, it was 2017, was a fairly different beast. I mean, they had already, I mean, kind of grown. But I think they were a different beast. And and I think I mean that's I think what made it is the fact that they really were looking at connecting secondary cities, and they were feeling very comfortable with the fact that the Udan scheme was being rolled out by the government, and I think that triggered the whole decision on their minds that it was a pretty safe kind of bet, and the incumbency on one side, the operating cost on the other, the shape of the network kind of became a no-brainer on that side. And to be fair, we had also at the time two very good salespeople in the position. One of them is a gentleman called Guillaume Huertas, who was taking care of India at the time, and Indigo, and another gentleman who is also a bit more famous in the industry is called Christian Scherer, who was the CEO of ATR at the time, and yeah, he's a magician, So he made the deal. I mean, together with Guillaume, and they had a yeah, they did a great job there actually. So.
And this is when Willy Bolter was around at Indigo?
No, I think he was Rakesh at the time.
Rakesh Gangwal.
Rakesh Gangwal, yeah,
Of
yeah, yeah.
course,
He
of
was
course.
the one at the helm at the time.
Got it. Cost efficiency is a strong selling point for ATR in India, especially considering the price sensitive market that we have. How do you ensure pricing and operating cost advantages remain attractive for Indian Airlines? I know we have spoken about how your aircraft under 500 kilometers, they are unbeatable in terms of their value proposition, right? Are there any other factors involved as well that really help your case?
I think the technology, again, because of the cycles and the shorter of the cycles, I mean, it helps. So it doesn't have an impact on maintenance cost of the engines. It has an impact on the fuel burn. I mean, if you look at the equivalent an equivalent size aircraft with a jet that will be fitted with a jet engine, you would talk about probably $800 more an hour just on fuel, right? On that kind of segments. That gives you a sense on the magnitude of, I mean, how much it costs. So that's, I mean, the biggest discriminant. But as I said, the competition is not the jets. So that's where, for me, it's a bit of a moot point. I mean, the question is, how do we make it attractive for the guy that takes the car? How do we make it attractive for the guy that wants to take the train? And so, of course, I mean, you have all the features of the offer. I mean, the frequency, the convenience. But when it comes to the sheer cost, I mean, there are other aspects. It's about the cost of funding. It's about the maintenance costs, and so those are areas where it's a constant fight and war for us to make sure we deliver, I mean, the best cost base for our customers, with suppliers, with the financial community. And I say war, I mean, it's not antagonistic. I think it's usually means something we have to do with them, because I mean we cannot force them to do these things. But it's a war collectively. I mean, we're fighting to make sure that we can deliver the best cost base on the market. And so engines, landing gears, avionics, and you saw that in the recent year, I mean, we've improved the engine together with Pratt & Whitney. We rolled out what they call the Pratt & Whitney 127M XT, which provide more time on wing, which allowed 20% better economics overall on the maintenance cost. As a matter of fact, it also delivers a 3% improvement on fuel burn. We've escalated some of the interval for maintenance, which also has an impact on the operating costs. So all that contributes, I mean, to make the aircraft more affordable and deliver better cost base for each place and tickets. Now, on a softer perspective, I mentioned as well about the funding costs. I mean, I think the fact that we have so many aircraft with so many customers in so many countries is an appealing perspective in terms of funding risk, and that provides as well an interesting way, I mean, for financial to look at it. So, I mean, regularly, I mean, I think as a matter of fact, every year, I mean, the ATR is voted as the best aircraft asset in regionals because of its resilience. So I think it's the Air Finance Journal that published that classement. I don't know how you say that in English. There are other perspectives as well. I mean, in terms of utilization, I mean, we tend to support our customers so they can increase utilization of the aircraft. So all that contributes to deliver, I mean, the best cost base on the market.
I was alluding to my conversation with Manoj Chako earlier, and during that conversation, one of the challenges he mentioned was slot availability at major airports. When I spoke to CEOs of major airports, they obviously denied that, but it's very well known that at busier airports, slots are a premium commodity. Airport authorities often prioritize jets with higher seat capacity and yield per movement. Now, ATR's 70-seat configuration may not justify the same slot as a 180-seat A320 or a Boeing 737 in terms of revenue or passenger throughput. Is there possibly a role that ATR can play in evangelizing airports on behalf of your airline clients, especially the smaller airlines?
So we don't do that, and that's a good idea. Maybe we should be more proactive there. I think the issue is acute in on the larger hubs in Delhi, Mumbai, because even you look at Bangalore or Hyderabad. I mean, I think we have a good presence there. And so maybe we should spend more time explaining. And as a matter of fact, we see some markets where the ATR is present in large platforms like London Heathrow, for instance. And they have specific approaches, and so they don't, I mean, take that much space at the end. And of course, they do take the space of a jet, so a larger jet. So I mean that can have an impact, on the revenue of the airport. But the truth is, it's minor on one side, and then I think it offers a lot of connectivity on the other. And an airport, wealth, an airport value is also a function of how many cities it connects and how many communities it can pull together. So I think this is where there's probably an argument that we can build there. But if I take a step back and I look at what the ATR does, it disintensify the traffic in larger hubs, because what we do is connect secondary cities. And so a hub today that is what we call the metros, right, in India, has a lot of connectivity, around the world and in the country. But if you look at tier one cities, I mean, they are not necessarily, slot constraints. And those could be connected with tier 2 or tier 3. And so what we allow is if you wanted to go from a tier 2 to another tier 2 or a tier 1 to a tier 2, sometimes you have to go through a big hub. What we allow is have direct connectivity in between. Because if I go back to what I said earlier about the mobility in the country, 90% is below 400 nautical miles. And so that's the kind of value proposition, is that by intensifying the traffic in this big platform, we can have an impact to reduce congestion. We can have an impact on making the connectivity more effective.
When I asked you earlier about FAL, you had mentioned besides that, there are so many other areas ATR is trying to get into in India. I've read about your interest in collaborating with Indian universities and supporting local aviation talent. Can you elaborate on your plans for developing the local ecosystem beyond just aircraft sales?
Yeah, so I think support is one of them, obviously. But as I said, we have MROs, we have training centers, and I think this ecosystem is growing organically with the fleet. And I think with Destiny, we're outlining. I mean, in the country, I think this is going to keep growing. Maybe we'll have to be more pushing in getting some additional capacity. Then, of course, there is the question of supply chain. I mean, I remember having this discussion with a journalist. I forgot his name. It was a very interesting discussion because he's saying, "But what do you think about supply chain and what's happening worldwide?" I think the situation today on the supply chain is the perfect moment to think about ways to develop, other sources. That's probably, the kind of moment that you need to look at that. And at that moment when we talked about it, we were talking about the space program of India, which made sense. This probe on the moon for a fraction of the budget of Europe, and that's why I remember having that discussion with him. Is that I think this is very promising if you have smart people like that can be impactful, quick, and affordable. That's the people you want to work with. That's the people you want to write the next chapter with. And that has been inhabitating me since, in the sense that I do believe that this is where we should go. And so brings me to the third part, is that I want to work with smart and brilliant people. I want to work with people that understand this perspective. So I think this is where I think university come into play. But beyond the engineering, beyond maybe the talented people we can get for our business, I think if you want to be truthful and answer to the right part of the market, you need to better understand it. And so while we have modeling and we have invested in that, I think I would be quite interested in understanding how, I don't know if there are Institute of Transportation Geography of India or policy, politics, social studies or politics studies in India that could give us their perspective. Because the ATR is not only an aircraft that we sell and then we pitch and then you buy 10 of them or 100 of them. I think it can support creating the fabric of the country. It can support, establishing sovereignty in areas that are, sometimes challenged. And I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to build together in that sense. And I think that's where working with these people, would be very useful, because we can then work together. And that's where I'm talking about Destiny, because I don't think it's about just a pitch. No, it's writing that page together and moving forward. Because quite frankly, as I said it, and if you ask the question, soon is going to be the biggest market by far.
That's very well said, JP. If a globally respected firm such as yours can play a part in nurturing aviation talent in the country, I think it'll be fantastic. So many people I talk to in the industry, the number one future facing challenge I hear is talent. Whether it'll be from the regulatory side, for airports, airlines, or other roles within the aviation industry in India, talent is a major issue. And I think there can be a great role that ATR can play. Nonetheless, you had mentioned something about new airports opening some time back. The aviation footprint in the country is expanding big time, right? If I can ask you, what is ATR's vision for its role in India's aviation ecosystem over the next 10, 15 years?
I believe that at the end, our role is to support not only the question of aviation, because I come back to what I said. I don't think the debate is about aviation only. It's about the regional mobility. It's about what is the strategy, of the governments in terms of mobility, intercity connectivity, footprints, in the regions, develop sovereignty. I mean, questions, and I think that's where we can play a role. And so, if anything, I mean, I would like to elevate the debates beyond that. Is that, I mean, and work with the because I don't think there is a Ministry of Transport per se. I think it's the Ministry of there's a big
So it's a
Minister of
road
Industry.
transport ministry, and then
Yeah,
there's the Ministry of Civil
of
Aviation.
civil aviation.
Then there is
But I think
Ministry of Shipping.
the
So
shipping and the rail as well. I mean, so
yeah,
there is all
so
these
four
things,
different
So.
ministries. Yes, correct.
And so I think we want to look at that, from a broader perspective, is that aviation is complementary. I mean, aviation at a regional level is complementary to the roads, is complementary to the rail, and they do very different and distinct mission. And so what I want, I mean, is to be part of that, right? I mean, for ATR to be part of this discussion, and because, I mean, our destiny has been linked in the past with India, and I see that moving forward is still going to be linked, is make sure we do that step together. I mean, kind of write that next page of that destiny. So there is no limit to what it means. I mean, it's who knows, maybe, I mean, yeah, like aircraft. I mean, like deeper relationship. I mean, I think the market in India is going to be by far, I mean, the biggest we have in for ATR.
And finally, JP, time to get your crystal ball out and maybe some black magic to know the answers. um, are there any plans to introduce new ATR models, and what's the future of ATR as we look into the next decade or so?
There is one compass you need to use. It's your customer. I think, I mean, you need to make sure that you're truthful to what they want and what they need. And to be fair, I mean, our customers, what they want and what they need, they tell us, we want the most affordable aircraft we can get in most markets. And so that means affordability in terms of manufacturing, affordability in terms of systems, in terms of
Innovation.
also availability, and that comes with innovation part, right? So, and of course, I think the biggest driver of innovation in aviation is the propulsion. So if you look at what could come next, is what we talked about, the Evo, I mean, the hybridation of the aircraft eventually, having a Prius, I mean, flying Prius somehow. And I think this will probably be the next frontier. I mean, in terms of delivering that kind of um, fuel burn, because it's going to be by essence lower, and therefore as well, I mean, more respectful of the environment, as well. Although, I mean, to be fair, with 700, less than 700 kilos an hour, I mean, the ATR today is already, I mean, quite frugal. But I think there is ways, I mean, to get, I mean, beyond that, once the technology will be ready with the batteries and stuff, right? So I think that could be where we want to go. We need to be mindful as well that what has done the success of the ATR, it's simplicity. It's I mean, there's this gentleman that worked. I mean, at the beginning of the program, I mean, he told me, the ATR was designed to be a fly-by-wire. I say, that's not what I heard, right? It's like, it's pretty hard wire that you have in there. It's a fly-by-wire because you can fix it with a wire, and that's, I mean, is one of the biggest, I would say, success, is that it's a simple aircraft that you can keep flying. I mean, in pretty remote areas, and that's what I think has been the fabric of the success. And that simplicity from the onset of the program has translated to one of the biggest advantage I think that the ATR has. It's grounded in an extremely light aerostructure. The operating weight of the aircraft is something that you cannot find today anywhere else. It was designed from the onset to be a very light aircraft, very simple. including, the forefathers of ATR. I mean, the people who were before us, I mean, they were extremely smart. And I think we should keep, truthful to that word, to keep it as simple as possible. And that's why the aircraft was designed that way. And it's a success 5 years, later because of that. And I think this is where you've seen the evolution of the aircraft has been an evolution, not a revolution per se. And like improvement of the avionics, improvement of the engines, improvement of the landing gears. I mean, slowly, we've been injecting more technology to make it more reliable, to make it more dependable, to make it more affordable to operate. And that's, I think, what we endeavor to do in the coming 10, 15 years. So crystal ball, a constant, tranquil evolution of the aircraft, injecting more and more technology, making it more and more affordable for the customer.
Do you believe in SAF?
It's from a very rational perspective, yes. I think it's the best way, to circulate the carbon. So, you extract carbon from the atmosphere, you put it back into a stable and liquid form to re-inject it back. I think before it gets there, we're gonna have to deliver, much cheaper electricity, because you need a lot of electricity to do SAF for the synthesis. But I think, unfortunately, I don't know if you read the bit what Yata was saying, the other day, is that affordability and availability is such that I think there's a few more years before we can get it widespread, used all around. But mandates from governments, mandates from legal aspect will support and help us. Making that more pregnant around the industry. But I think it's going to take a little more while before we see that actually being more accepted.
Yeah, I don't think SAF is really the answer. There is not enough of it, frankly, and scaling up production there has its own challenges. However, I think what Jet Zero is trying to do with a blended wing model and just much more efficient, that to me is exciting and possibly the future of commercial aviation in some ways. But I'm not going to talk to you about that right now.
Maybe we should talk. No, it would be interesting. It's nice to be doing the talking, but you have a wealth of experience and knowledge that I'll be interested to hear as well. So maybe next time I do the interview for you.
Yeah, sure, done, JP. And thank you, Jian. And thank you to you too, of course, JP. So very kind of you to take the time and chat with me. I had a great time.
No, thank you. Vishal, and again, my apologies for Friday. And I really look forward, catching up again, having the opportunity to exchange with you. If you have any further questions on what we say today, because sometimes I speak a bit fast, and so don't hesitate. And if you want to catch up or come to Toulouse, you are our guest. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this high altitude conversation with JP from ATR. I enjoyed that conversation very much. Next week, it'll be the return of the Indian Ad Geek, and Kunal Jeswani from Ogilvy will be on the show. As usual, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode of the Indian Av Geek with your fellow Av Geeks. I'm at Vishal Mehra on X. Always happy to have your feedback. With that, keep your tray tables up, your seatbelts fastened. I wish you well, and happy flying, my friends!